The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls shimmering with light from 1,000 different worlds. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their designated areas, each species distinct in their own strange way. The Valorians with their golden skin gleamed under the artificial suns. The hegemony delegates sat rigid in their scaled armor. The Celestial Federation members floated in their environmental suits, their gaseous forms swirling with emotion. At the human section, Ambassador Lisa Carter stood quietly behind her podium. Her simple blue uniform looked plain compared to the elaborate clothing and biological displays around her. Beside her, Jake Morrison checked his tablet one more time, making sure all their documents were in order. They both knew what was coming. Chairman Vexitar rose from his massive throne at the center of the hall. His reptilian form towered over the assembly, his yellow eyes scanning the crowd with satisfaction. Today was the day he had worked toward for years. Today, humanity would finally be put in its proper place. Fellow beings of the galaxy, Vexitar began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. We gather today to address a problem that has plagued our peaceful community for too long. The human species has repeatedly shown that they cannot follow the rules that keep our galaxy stable. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the alien delegates. Lisa Carter remained silent, her face showing no emotion. She had heard these accusations many times before. Let us review the evidence, Vexitar continued, gesturing to a holographic display that appeared above the assembly. The incident at Kepler 7, where human forces attacked mining operations without council approval. The interference in the Zephyrian labor disputes. The unauthorized medical interventions on Tau Ceti. Time and again, humans have acted without permission, without regard for proper procedures. The display showed images of human ships and soldiers in action. To the Council, these looked like acts of aggression. To the humans, they were memories of lives saved and suffering prevented. But no one asked for the human perspective. Secretary General Northak of the Celestial Federation spoke next, his gaseous form shifting to deep red as he expressed anger. The humans claim they were helping, but help was not requested. They ignore our sovereignty. They act as if they know better than species with thousands of years of civilization. More voices joined in. The Threnody representative spoke of human arrogance. The crystalline delegate complained about disrupted trade agreements. One by one, they built their case against humanity. The accusations flowed like water, washing away years of human service and sacrifice. Lisa Carter listened to it all. She thought about Captain Stone's last report from the mining colonies, where human peacekeepers had stopped the mass poisoning of native workers. She remembered Dr. Rodriguez's medical team working around the clock to cure a plague that alien doctors had declared hopeless. She recalled Admiral Blake's fleet arriving just in time to prevent a war that would have killed millions. But none of that mattered now. The Council had made up its mind long before this session began. The motion before us is clear, Vexitar announced. Humanity will be stripped of its voting rights in this council. They will become observers only, with no voice in galactic affairs. They may remain in council space, but they will no longer interfere in matters beyond their understanding. The vote began. One by one, species that had been saved by human intervention cast their votes against humanity. The Zephyrians, whose children now lived free because of human action, voted yes. The Meridian Coalition, whose worlds had been protected by human fleets, voted yes. The Medical Alliance, whose hospitals used human-designed equipment, voted yes. Jake Morrison whispered the count to Lisa Carter as it progressed. 237 for the motion. 15 against, 23 abstentions. The result was overwhelming. Humanity was officially demoted to observer status in the Galactic Council. Chairman Vexitar stood again, his satisfaction clear in every movement. The decision is final. Humanity will learn to respect the wisdom of their betters. Perhaps in time, when they have shown proper humility, they may earn their way back to full membership. Applause echoed through the hall. Not from every delegate, but from enough to make the point clear. The galaxy had spoken, and it had rejected human leadership. Lisa Carter gathered her papers slowly. She made no speech of protest. She filed no appeal. She simply packed her materials with the same professional calm she had shown throughout her career. Jake Morrison followed her lead, shutting down their equipment and securing their files. As they prepared to leave, several alien delegates approached them. Some looked uncomfortable, others openly hostile. A few seemed genuinely sad about the outcome. Ambassador Kletvia of the neutral world stopped them at the exit. Her species looked almost human except for the silver skin and extra arms. "Lisa," she said quietly, "this doesn't have to be permanent. If your people show proper respect for council procedures, if they learn to ask permission before acting." Lisa Carter looked at her old friend with tired eyes. "Kletvia, we always asked permission. The answer was always wait for committee approval, or file the proper forms, or respect sovereign rights. By the time we got permission, the people who needed help were usually dead. But surely you understand why the council is concerned," Kletvia pressed. "Your people act so quickly, so decisively. It makes others nervous." "Yes," Lisa replied. "I understand perfectly." She walked away without another word, Jake Morrison following close behind. Their footsteps echoed in the vast hallway as they left the council chambers for the last time as voting members. Outside the building, Jake finally spoke. "Ambassador, the message from Earth. Should we send the response?" Lisa Carter looked up at the artificial sky of the council world, where stars from 100 systems sparkled in the false night. Somewhere out there, human ships were already receiving new orders. Somewhere out there, the consequences of this day were already beginning. "Send it," she said simply. The message was brief, sent on encrypted channels to every human facility, ship and outpost in council space. It contained only a few words, but those words would change everything. "Operation Homecoming is approved. Begin immediate withdrawal. Silent protocols in effect." Within hours, the message had reached every corner of the galaxy where humans worked and lived. The great experiment was over. Humanity had been asked to step back, and step back they would. The council had made its choice. Soon they would learn what that choice really meant. The first sign that something had changed came 3 weeks after the council vote. Captain Alex Stone stood on the observation deck of Meridian Station, watching the last of his human crew load their personal belongings onto transport ships. The massive defense platform that guarded one of the galaxy's most important trade routes would soon be staffed entirely by alien personnel. "Sir, the Valorian replacement crew is requesting access to the main computer cores," reported Lieutenant Kelly Barnes, her voice carefully neutral. She had served under Stone for 5 years, helping to coordinate the defense of 3 star systems. Now she was packing her uniforms and preparing to return to Earth. "Tell them the cores are encrypted and will remain so until our departure is complete," Stone replied. "Standard security protocols." It was true, but it was also more than that. The human-designed systems that controlled Meridian Station were incredibly complex, built with technology that other species had never fully understood. The Valorians could operate the basic functions, but the advanced tactical systems, the predictive algorithms, and the maintenance protocols were mysteries to them. Stone watched as Commander Ray Phillips supervised the removal of human equipment from the engineering section. Phillips had personally designed many of the station's defensive improvements, working 18-hour days to strengthen the barriers that protected the shipping lanes. His knowledge was walking away with him, and no amount of technical manuals could replace it. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds and stations. At the New Geneva Research Complex, Dr. Emma Rodriguez finished her final experiment and began the careful process of shutting down her laboratory. Her team had been working on a cure for Tellurian wasting disease, a condition that affected 6 different species. The research was 90% complete, but that 10% represented months of additional work. "Dr. Rodriguez, surely you don't have to take all of your equipment," pleaded Dr. Quinzeth, the facility director. His Valorian features were tight with worry as he watched crate after crate of instruments being loaded onto human transports. "The council would be happy to purchase the devices from Earth. Name any reasonable price." Emma paused in her packing, looking at the alien scientist who had been her colleague for 3 years. "Quinzeth, this equipment was designed by humans for human research methods. Without the proper training and support, it's just expensive decoration." "But the cure you were developing," Quinzeth pressed, "millions of beings could benefit from your work." "Then the council should have thought of that before they decided we were too dangerous to have a voice in galactic affairs," Emma replied quietly. She sealed the last crate and marked it for transport. "I'm sorry, but my contract was terminated. I'm going home." The pattern repeated everywhere humans had established themselves. Dr. Tony Martinez closed his clinic on Rho Centauri, taking with him the only treatment for a rare nerve disorder that affected the local population. Engineer Susan Walsh shut down the atmospheric processing station on Kepler 9, where her team had been working to make a dead world habitable for refugees. Teacher Bob Johnson packed up his classroom on New Harmony, leaving behind students from 12 different species who had been learning to work together. Each departure was professional and courteous. The humans fulfilled their contractual obligations, transferred what records they could legally share, and left detailed instructions for basic maintenance. But the deeper knowledge, the intuitive understanding that came from years of experience, left with them. At first, many alien officials dismissed the withdrawals as petty revenge. Secretary General Northak gave an interview to the Galactic News Network, his gaseous form swirling with confident blue patterns. If humans wish to isolate themselves from civilized society, that is their choice. The galaxy managed quite well before they arrived, and we will continue to prosper after they leave. The Threnody trade minister was even more blunt. Good riddance. Human merchants always drove too hard a bargain anyway. Our own traders will fill the gaps left by their departure. But as weeks turned into months, cracks began to appear in the Council's confidence. The first major problem emerged at the Outer Rim Medical Center, where human doctors had made up 30% of the staff. The remaining alien physicians found themselves overwhelmed, not just by patient load, but by the complexity of treating multiple species with different biologies. Dr. Zeftar, the center's chief of medicine, stared at a patient chart in confusion. The being on the table was a Meridian trader suffering from what appeared to be simple food poisoning, but the symptoms weren't responding to standard treatment. In the past, he would have consulted with Dr. Sarah Wells, the human specialist who understood cross-species toxicology better than anyone in the sector. "Can we contact Dr. Wells directly?" he asked his assistant. "I tried," came the reply. "The Colonial Medical Board says they're not providing consultation services to non-human entities at this time." The Meridian trader died 6 hours later from complications that Dr. Wells could have prevented with a simple injection. Similar problems cascaded across Council space. The shipping lane computers at junction points began showing errors that no one knew how to fix. Manufacturing plants that produced goods for multiple species found their quality control systems failing without human technicians to maintain them. Even simple things like elevator systems and air recyclers started breaking down without the regular maintenance that human engineers had provided. On Proxima Station, Administrator Felton faced a crisis that perfectly illustrated the growing problem. The station's water purification system had developed a fault that was contaminating the drinking supply for 50,000 residents. The system was human-designed, installed 5 years ago as part of a humanitarian aid project. Surely someone must understand how to repair it, Felton pleaded with his engineering staff. Chief Engineer Colmus, a member of the technically advanced crystalline hierarchy, examined the schematic displays with growing frustration. The design is elegant but completely unlike our engineering principles. The humans use intuitive solutions rather than mathematical precision. Without someone who understands their thinking patterns, we're essentially guessing. What about the instruction manuals they left? The manuals cover routine maintenance, but this is a complex failure involving multiple subsystems. We need someone who truly understands the technology, not just someone who can read a checklist. Felton stared at the contamination readings, watching them slowly climb toward dangerous levels. In the past, a quick call to the human engineering firm would have brought a repair team within hours. Now that firm was based on Earth, firmly outside Council space, and not accepting contracts from alien governments. The water crisis lasted 2 weeks before Felton swallowed his pride and put out a desperate call for any human engineer willing to help. The response came from an independent contractor named Gary Thompson, who had refused to join the official withdrawal. "I can fix your system," Thompson said over the communication link, "but my rates have gone up considerably since I became the only human engineer in this sector." "Name your price," Felton replied immediately. 50,000 credits, plus full diplomatic immunity, plus a guarantee that no council authority will interfere with my work or question my methods. It was 10 times the normal rate for such a repair, but Felton agreed instantly. The alternative was evacuating the entire station. Thompson fixed the water system in 3 hours. As he prepared to leave, Felton asked the question that was haunting officials across the galaxy. Thompson, how long can this continue? Surely your people will come back eventually. The human engineer looked at him with tired eyes. Administrator, you told us we were too dangerous to be trusted with important decisions. We're just honoring your judgment. Earth has plenty of work for its technical people, and we don't have to deal with committees and bureaucrats questioning our every move. But the galaxy needs human expertise. Then maybe the galaxy should have thought of that before, deciding we were the problem. Thompson left on his ship that afternoon, and Felton was left to contemplate a future where such help might not be available at any price. The emergency alert screamed through the Tau Ceti Mining Consortium's control center at 0347 local time. Operations Manager Valkyra jolted awake in his rest pod, his forearms scrambling to activate the communication systems. The readings on his screen made his blood run cold. Reactor 7 was in cascade failure. The massive fusion plant that powered the entire mining operation was experiencing a containment breach that could contaminate 3 star systems if it went critical. Worse yet, the automatic safety systems had malfunctioned, leaving manual control as the only option to prevent catastrophe. "Get me the human engineering team," Valkyra barked at his assistant as he rushed toward the control room. "Sir, the humans left 6 months ago," came the nervous reply. "The new crystalline engineering staff is en route, but they're still 40 minutes away." Valkyra's secondary heart skipped a beat. Chief Engineer Carol Mitchell and her team had designed most of the safety systems for the Tau Ceti operation. They understood the reactor technology better than anyone else in the sector, having spent 3 years adapting human fusion techniques to work with alien materials and safety requirements. In the control room, chaos reigned. Alarms blared from every console as radiation levels climbed steadily. The Valorian shift supervisor, Kethmol, was frantically trying to activate emergency protocols that he barely understood. "The containment field is fluctuating," he reported, his golden skin pale with fear. "I'm reading power surges in the magnetic bottles, but the compensation algorithms aren't responding." Valkyra studied the displays, feeling helpless. The reactor design was brilliant in its simplicity, using human engineering principles that emphasized elegant solutions over complex redundancies. But that same simplicity made it nearly impossible for non-humans to understand when things went wrong. "Can we contact the human engineers directly?" he asked desperately. His communication officer, a Threnody named Silthar, shook her head. "I've been trying for the past 20 minutes. Earth's Colonial Technical Support Division says they no longer provide emergency assistance to non-human entities. Offer them money. Offer them anything." "I did, sir. They were very polite but firm." The response was that their resources are now allocated exclusively to serving human interests. The crystalline engineering team arrived 37 minutes later, their insectoid forms moving with precise efficiency through the control room. Team leader Zixtal studied the reactor schematics with her compound eyes, her crystalline carapace clicking as she processed the information. "This design philosophy is completely alien to our methods," she announced, after several tense minutes. "Human engineers think in curves and approximations rather than precise mathematical relationships. I can see what they were trying to achieve, but not how they achieved it." "Can you stop the cascade failure?" Valkyra asked, watching the radiation levels climb toward the red zone. "Perhaps, but the risk is enormous. Without understanding the design logic, any intervention could make the situation worse." For 6 more hours, the crystalline team worked frantically to decode the human engineering. They made 3 attempts to stabilize the reactor, each one failing as the elegant human systems refused to respond to alien logic. Finally, with radiation levels approaching critical, they managed a partial success, reducing the output to 40% of normal and stabilizing the magnetic containment. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The reactor would never operate at full capacity again. The mining operation, which had employed 12,000 workers and supplied rare minerals to half the galaxy, was effectively dead. The economic impact rippled outward instantly, affecting trade routes and manufacturing centers across dozens of star systems. The Tau Ceti disaster was headline news across Council space, but it was far from the only crisis. At the Central Medical Complex on Vega Prime, Dr. Thekalar faced his own nightmare scenario. The hospital's advanced life support systems were failing one by one, and he had no idea how to fix them. The medical complex served the entire sector, treating patients from 27 different species. Its sophisticated equipment could adapt to virtually any alien biology, adjusting everything from atmospheric composition to nutrient delivery to match each patient's needs. The systems were marvels of human medical engineering, combining adaptability with reliability in ways that alien doctors found miraculous. But now those same systems were breaking down, and the human medical technicians who had maintained them were gone. How many patients are we looking at losing? Dr. Theklar asked his staff during the morning crisis meeting. Currently, we have 47 beings on full life support, reported head nurse Yolandra. If we can't restore the systems to full functionality within 72 hours, we'll need to begin evacuation procedures. To where? Every major medical facility in the sector uses similar human-designed equipment. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Across the galaxy, medical centers were facing the same problem. The sophisticated equipment that had revolutionized multi-species healthcare was becoming useless without human expertise to maintain it. Dr. Theklar made the decision that dozens of other administrators were making at the same time. He authorized an emergency payment of 2 million credits to hire Marcus Webb, one of the few independent human medical engineers still operating in council space. Webb arrived within 6 hours, his ship's cargo bay packed with replacement parts and diagnostic equipment. He was a thin, quiet man who had refused to join the official withdrawal because his wife was undergoing treatment at a Valorian medical center. "Doctor, I can restore your systems to full functionality," Webb said after examining the equipment. "But I need to be honest with you about the long-term situation. There are maybe 20 human medical engineers left in this entire sector, and we're all independents. When the current generation of equipment fails, there won't be replacements." "What do you mean?" "The manufacturing plants that build this stuff are all in human space now. Earth isn't selling advanced medical technology to alien governments anymore. Something about security concerns and technology transfer restrictions." Dr. Theklar felt a chill run down his spine. "How long do we have?" "The equipment was built to last maybe 10 to 15 years with proper maintenance. But without replacement parts and upgrade support, you're looking at a steady decline in capability. In 5 years, you might be back to treating each species separately, with much more primitive equipment." Webb worked for 18 hours straight, restoring the life support systems and stabilizing the complex's operations. When he was finished, Dr. Theklar walked him to his ship personally. "Mr. Webb, what would it take to convince the human engineers to come back?" Webb paused at the airlock, considering the question carefully. "Doctor, it's not about money or contracts. Earth made a strategic decision after the council vote. They're not coming back unless the political situation changes fundamentally. But surely they understand that people are dying. They understand perfectly. They also understand that the council decided human judgment couldn't be trusted, so they're respecting that decision by keeping their dangerous opinions to themselves." Webb's ship lifted off that evening, leaving Dr. Theklar to contemplate a future where his medical complex might become a monument to alien pride and human absence. The pattern was repeating everywhere. On manufacturing worlds, production lines ground to a halt as human-designed automation systems failed. On trading stations, the complex logistics programs that coordinated shipping across multiple species began producing errors that no one knew how to correct. Even simple things like atmospheric processors and gravity generators started showing problems that alien engineers couldn't solve. The galaxy was slowly discovering that human involvement hadn't been just helpful. It had been essential, and now that involvement was gone, withdrawn by people who had been told their help wasn't wanted. The Orion sector burned. From his command center on the neutral world of Haven, Ambassador Chen Wei watched the tactical displays with growing horror as two of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations tore each other apart. The war between the crystalline hierarchy and the flesh cartel had escalated beyond anything seen in recorded history. What had started as a border dispute over mining rights had exploded into total warfare when the flesh cartel attacked a crystalline civilian transport. The hierarchy's response was swift and brutal, glassing 3 cartel colonies in a single day. Now, 6 months later, entire star systems were becoming uninhabitable as both sides unleashed weapons that violated every treaty on civilized warfare. Current casualty estimates? Chen Wei asked his aide, though he dreaded the answer. Conservative estimates put the death toll at 4 billion beings, came the reply. Refugee ships are fleeing the combat zone, but most systems are refusing to accept them. The numbers are simply too overwhelming. Chen Wei nodded grimly. In the past, this crisis would have been handled very differently. Admiral Susan Blake's Fifth Fleet would have been deployed to the sector within days of the first shots being fired. Her ships carried enough firepower to force both sides to negotiate, and her reputation for fair but firm peacekeeping meant that most conflicts ended before they could escalate. But Admiral Blake was now patrolling the borders of human space, her fleet under strict orders not to interfere in alien conflicts. The Council's Peacekeeping Committee was under the command of Admiral Thexnol of the Threnody Republic, a cautious leader who believed deeply in non-interference doctrine. Has Admiral Thexnol responded to the latest casualty reports? Chen Wei asked. Yes, sir. The Admiral maintains that this is a sovereign dispute between two independent powers. The Peacekeeping Committee cannot intervene without formal request from both parties. It was exactly the kind of bureaucratic thinking that had frustrated human peacekeepers for decades. While committees debated and forms were filed, civilizations died. The crystalline hierarchy would never request outside intervention. Their pride wouldn't allow it. The Flesh Cartel was incapable of making such requests because their governmental structure had collapsed under the weight of military losses. The latest intelligence reports painted a picture of accelerating devastation. The crystalline forces had deployed planet killers, massive weapons that could crack a world's crust and leave it uninhabitable. The Flesh Cartel had responded with bioweapons that consumed all organic matter on targeted worlds, leaving behind dead rocks floating in space, sir. We're receiving emergency transmissions from the refugee convoy that left the Xerion system, his communication officer announced. They're reporting that cartel bioships are pursuing them. Chen Wei activated the main display, showing the tactical situation near the Meridian Gate. Thousands of civilian ships, carrying survivors from destroyed worlds, were fleeing toward neutral space. Behind them, 3 massive Flesh Cartel vessels were closing the distance, their hulls pulsing with the organic weaponry that could strip a planet clean in hours. Where's the nearest Council peacekeeping patrol? He asked urgently. The Valorian 7th Squadron is 4 days away at maximum speed, came the reply. The refugees will be overtaken in 18 hours. Chen Wei stared at the display, feeling the weight of his helplessness. 18 hours from now, millions of innocent beings would die while the galaxy's official peacekeepers were still traveling to the scene. The bitter irony was that a single human destroyer could handle all 3 cartel ships easily. But those destroyers were now far away, protecting human worlds that had been deemed too dangerous for galactic society. The refugee ships made their last transmission 6 hours before the cartel vessels reached them. The voice was that of Captain Yeltara, a crystalline officer who had loaded her passenger liner with survivors from 7 different species. This is transport unity to any vessel receiving this signal. We are carrying approximately 50,000 civilian refugees, including 12,000 younglings. Cartel bioships are closing on our position. We have no weapons and no military escort. If anyone can hear this transmission, please remember that we tried to reach safety. The transmission ended in static. When the Valorian squadron finally arrived, they found only empty space and the slowly dissipating clouds of organic matter that marked the cartel's feeding frenzy. The massacre of the refugee convoy became a rallying cry across neutral space. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds as citizens demanded action from their governments. On Haven, Chen Wei found himself fielding desperate calls from officials who had run out of options. Ambassador Chen, surely the humans can be convinced to intervene, pleaded Minister Felcora of the Outer Rim Alliance. This isn't about politics anymore. This is about preventing genocide. I've tried, Chen Wei replied wearily. The colonial administration's response is always the same. They appreciate our concern, but they're no longer involved in galactic security matters. But people are dying by the millions. Yes, they are. And the Galactic Council made it very clear that human intervention was unwelcome. Earth is simply honoring that decision. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from Chen Wei's intelligence staff. Long-range sensors had detected a massive fleet movement in the Orion sector. Both the Crystalline Hierarchy and the Flesh Cartel were committing their entire military forces to a final battle at the Nexus Point, a strategic location that controlled access to 3 different spiral arms of the galaxy. Estimated forces? Chenwei asked. The crystallines are deploying everything they have. Over 2,000 ships, including their planet killers. The cartel is responding with an equivalent biofleet. Sir, if they clash at the nexus point, the gravitational disturbances alone could destabilize hyperspace routes throughout this entire region. Chenwei felt a chill run down his spine. The nexus point wasn't just strategically important, it was the hub for civilian shipping throughout the local galaxy. If the hyperspace routes collapsed, dozens of systems would be cut off from trade and communication. Some worlds would face starvation within months. He made a decision that went against every diplomatic protocol he had been taught. Opening a direct channel to Earth, he bypassed the official communication networks and sent a personal message to Admiral Blake. Susan, it's Chenwei. I know you can't respond officially, but I need you to understand what's happening here. The Orion sector is about to tear itself apart, and when it does, the damage will spread far beyond the warring parties. Millions of innocent beings will die, not from warfare, but from the collapse of the infrastructure that keeps this region of space habitable. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm not asking you to save us. I'm not asking you to violate your orders. I'm just asking you to remember that some of us tried to speak for humanity when the votes were cast. Some of us understood what the galaxy was losing. The message was sent on encrypted channels, using diplomatic codes that Chenwei probably shouldn't have had access to. He never received a direct reply, but 6 hours later, long-range sensors detected something that made his communication staff double-check their instruments. A single ship had entered the Orion sector from the direction of human space. It was broadcasting a simple message on all frequencies. This vessel is conducting a scientific survey of hyperspace stability in the Nexus Point region. Please maintain safe distances. The ship was the UES Determination, one of the newest vessels in the human fleet. It wasn't technically a warship. It was classified as a research vessel. But research vessels didn't normally mount the kind of weaponry that the Determination carried. And they certainly didn't have the kind of defensive systems that could withstand planet-killer blasts. Admiral Blake's ship positioned itself directly at the nexus point, right between the two converging fleets. Its presence changed everything. Neither the crystallines nor the cartel wanted to risk damaging the hyperspace junction with a human vessel in the area. The potential diplomatic consequences were too severe. For 3 tense days, the fleets faced each other across the void while the Determination conducted its scientific survey. Blake never communicated with either side, never made demands or threats. She simply maintained position and recorded hyperspace measurements with the kind of thorough professionalism that humans brought to everything they did. On the 4th day, both fleets began to withdraw. The moment had passed, the momentum of total warfare broken by the presence of a single ship that wasn't supposed to be there. The Orion War continued, but the final apocalyptic battle that would have killed billions never took place. Chenwei never found out if Admiral Blake had acted on her own initiative or under secret orders from Earth. But as he watched the casualty reports stabilize and the refugee flow slow to manageable levels, he understood that humanity hadn't completely abandoned the galaxy. They had simply become very selective about when and how they chose to help. The price of that selectivity was becoming clear to everyone. Without human peacekeepers maintaining stability, the galaxy was descending into chaos, one crisis at a time. The Galactic Council chamber looked nothing like it had 2 years earlier. Half the delegate seats sat empty, their occupants either dead in wars that raged unchecked or missing from species that had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely. The great crystal walls were cracked and dim, their maintenance systems failing without human technicians to repair them. The artificial atmosphere smelled stale and recycled, processed by backup systems that barely functioned. Chairman Vexitar stood at his podium, but the imposing reptilian figure who had once commanded the galaxy with confidence was gone. His scales were dull gray with stress, and his hands shook as he called the emergency session to order. Around him, the remaining delegates looked equally worn down by 2 years of cascading disasters. Fellow beings, Vextar began, his voice barely carrying through the failing sound system. We gather today to address the crisis that has engulfed our galaxy. The statistics before us are undeniable. 17 separate wars have erupted since the human withdrawal began. 4 member species have been rendered extinct. Trade has collapsed by 73%. Medical crises that should have been easily manageable have claimed over 8 billion lives. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. Ambassador Chen Wei looked around the chamber at the faces of delegates who had once been so certain that removing humanity from power was the right choice. Now they looked like survivors of a catastrophe they had brought upon themselves. Secretary General Northak of the Celestial Federation spoke first, his gaseous form a pale shadow of its former vibrant colors. The motion before us today is simple. We formally request the return of humanity to full council membership, with voting rights restored and additional concessions to be negotiated. What concessions are we prepared to offer? Asked Ambassador Kletvia of the Neutral Worlds. Though her voice lacked conviction, the list was extensive and humiliating. Permanent seats on all major committees for human representatives, veto power over military actions, exclusive contracts for infrastructure maintenance, access to council records and strategic planning. The galaxy's former leaders were prepared to hand over effective control to the species they had once dismissed as dangerous children. The vote is unanimous among present members, Vexstar announced after the brief debate. Earth will be offered these terms immediately. The transmission to Earth was sent with the highest priority codes, marked for immediate delivery to the colonial administration. The response came back within hours, but it wasn't from any government official. Instead, the reply came from a simple automated system, broadcasting on all council frequencies. The voice was familiar to every delegate present. Former Ambassador Lisa Carter spoke with the same calm professionalism she had shown during her years of service. But her words carried a finality that chilled the assembly. To the representatives of the Galactic Council, the message began. We acknowledge receipt of your request for renewed human participation in galactic affairs. However, we must respectfully decline. The silence in the chamber was absolute. This was not the response they had expected. The humans were supposed to be eager to return, grateful for the opportunity to rejoin galactic civilization. The Council has made its position regarding humanity abundantly clear, Carter's voice continued. We are too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to interfere in matters that don't concern us. After careful consideration, we have concluded that the Council's assessment was correct. Human involvement in galactic affairs has indeed been problematic. Our peacekeepers prevented wars that perhaps needed to be fought. Our doctors cured diseases that may have served important population control functions. Our engineers built systems that made other species dependent rather than self-reliant. Our merchants established trade networks that disrupted traditional economic relationships. The words were like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. The assembled delegates began to understand that this wasn't a negotiation. It was a final judgment. Humanity has therefore decided to respect the Council's wisdom by permanently withdrawing from galactic affairs. We will focus exclusively on human worlds and human interests. We wish the galaxy well in its efforts to achieve the stability and prosperity that our interference had apparently prevented. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Several delegates tried frantically to establish communication with Earth, but their calls were either ignored or redirected to the same automated response. Ambassador Chen Wei finally spoke into the silence. What have we done? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Outside the council chambers, the galaxy continued its slow collapse. The Orion sector wars had ended not in peace but in mutual exhaustion as both sides ran out of ships and soldiers. The survivors huddled on devastated worlds, struggling to rebuild without the technology and expertise that humans had once provided freely. Medical centers across hundreds of worlds faced the reality that their advanced equipment would fail within a few years, and there would be no replacements. Manufacturing centers shut down as their automation systems became unrepairable. Space stations drifted in slowly decaying orbits as their maintenance schedules fell behind. On Proxima Station, Administrator Felton faced the inevitable. The water purification system that Gary Thompson had repaired was failing again, and this time there was no human engineer available at any price. The independent contractors had gradually been recalled to human space or had chosen to retire, rather than work in the increasingly chaotic conditions of Council territory. How long do we have? Felton asked his engineering staff for the third time in 2 years. Maybe 6 weeks before we have to begin evacuation procedures, came the grim reply. The backup systems aren't designed to handle the full station population long term. Across the galaxy, Similar conversations were taking place. The careful infrastructure that had supported galactic civilization was crumbling, and no one knew how to fix it. The species that had voted to remove humanity from power discovered that they had also voted to remove their own ability to maintain the society they had built. Dr. Thekolar, at the Central Medical Complex, watched his patient monitors with growing despair. The sophisticated life support systems were failing one by one, and each failure meant the death of beings who could have been saved. His staff had learned to operate simpler equipment, but they were essentially practicing medicine with technology that was centuries out of date. "Doctor, the Meridian family is asking about their son's treatment," reported his chief nurse. "The neural reconstruction procedure he needs requires the quantum medical array." "The array failed last week," Thekolar replied quietly. "Tell them we're doing everything we can with conventional treatments." It was a lie, and everyone knew it. Conventional treatments wouldn't save the young Meridian, just as they couldn't save the dozens of other patients who needed advanced human medical technology. The boy would die, joining the growing list of casualties from humanity's absence. Captain Roy Martinez, one of the last independent human merchants still operating in council space, found himself besieged by desperate requests. Government officials offered him planetary treasures for basic technical support. Military commanders begged him to carry messages to human space, hoping to find some way to reopen communication with Earth. "Captain, surely there must be some way to convince your people to reconsider," pleaded Minister Felcora during their latest meeting. "Name any price. We'll pay anything." Martinez looked at the alien official with something approaching pity. "Minister, this isn't about money. This is about respect. You told us our judgment couldn't be trusted, that our methods were wrong, that our involvement was harmful. So we stopped being involved. But we didn't mean permanently. We thought you would learn to work within our systems. We tried that for decades. Every time we asked permission to help someone, the answer was wait for committee approval or file the proper forms or respect sovereign rights. By the time we got permission, the people who needed help were usually dead." Martinez gathered his belongings and headed for his ship. "Minister, you got exactly what you asked for. A galaxy where humans don't interfere in things that don't concern us. This is what that looks like." As his ship lifted off from Haven Station, Martinez looked back at the slowly dying facility through his viewports. In a few months, he would be the last human in this sector of space. After that, the galaxy would be completely free of the dangerous, unpredictable species that had once tried to help. In human space, Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of her flagship, monitoring long-range sensors that showed the chaos spreading through what had once been Council territory. Her crew watched the distant civilizations tear themselves apart, and many of them struggled with the decision to remain uninvolved. "Admiral," her aide commander Nick Stevens said quietly, "the latest intelligence reports show massive civilian casualties in the Vega sector. A simple peacekeeping mission could save millions of lives." Blake studied the tactical displays for a long moment, her face showing no emotion. "Commander, the Galactic Council determined that human peacekeeping missions were acts of aggression. Who are we to question their wisdom? But Admiral, surely we have a moral obligation to help."